Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We have an amazing program this evening. My name is Stephanie Chaikin. I'm the director of the NJCU Center for the Arts. And on behalf of the Center for the Arts and the English Department Student Events and Publications Committee, I'd like to welcome you to the Poetry of Memory, a conversation with Maria Mazziotti Gillan, hosted by Dr. Edwidge Junta and Kaylee Morell. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our host this evening. Dr. Edwidge Junta is a professor of English at NJCU. She has published several books, including Writing with an Accent, Contemporary Italian-American Women Authors, and the co-edited anthologies, The Milk of Almonds, Italian-American Women Writers on Food and Culture and Personal Effects, Essays on Teaching, Memoir and Culture in the Work of Louise DeSalvo. Her co-edited anthology, Talking to the Girls, Intimate and Political Essays on the Triangle Fire, will be published in 2022 by New Village Press. Kaylee Morell is a student at New Jersey City University, where she majors in English with a concentration in creative writing. She lives in Secaucus, New Jersey. Her passion for reading and writing has flourished over the course of her undergraduate career, but her love for both started when she was in elementary school. She is currently interning as an assistant editor with Memoir magazine and hopes to work in publishing while continuing to write. So we're in good hands this evening, and I'm going to turn this over to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you to the NJCU Center for the Arts for hosting another one of our literary events. They're really the highlight of my year and give me these wonderful opportunities to work collaboratively with students as brilliant as Kaylee Morell, and to be able to be in conversation with people like Maria Gillan. I mean, really, if you were to ask me who, you want to choose who you're going to spend the evening with, well, Maria is really at the top of my list, and I haven't seen her in person for far too long. So wonderful to see your beautiful face, Maria, and thank you so much for so generously coming to spend this hour with us. I remember thinking of literary influence as something that came from dead authors. You read books by dead authors and they influenced you because they were important, because they had learned and done something that could shape and impact your writing. Well, over time, as I've gone deeper and deeper into my writing, I've been very fortunate to really be able to experience the privilege and the joy of feeling very close to my heart the influence of living writers. And Maria Gillan is really one of such writers. I really hear your voice in my head, Maria, so I don't know what you've done to me. And I know I am not the only one. Maria is such a force in the world of poetry and literature. And whether you write poetry or, as I do, mostly memoir, the impact of Maria's influence is really incredible. And I can see many familiar faces. So welcome to so many fellow writers, and also a special welcome to my students who are working in a course called Archaeology of Self, Family and Culture. And I cannot think of a better writer to show you the way into the past, into how to dig up from your memories and tell your story. I could spend the next hour just telling you about all of Maria's accomplishments, which I had to compress very succinctly, but of course I feel the obligation to mention at least a few of them. Just know that Maria Mazziotti Gillan has published more than 20 books of and about poetry, and she has edited 4 anthologies. Let me just mention her most recent book, When the Stars Were Still Visible, and her guide for writers, Writing Poetry to Save Your Life, How to Find the Courage to tell your stories. And the title of the book tells you everything that you need to know about Maria's work. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Poetry Island, the Los Angeles Review, the Christian Science Monitor, and many other journals and anthologies. I got lost in the list of Maria's awards, so I'm just going to list a few. There is the 2014 George Garrett Award for Outstanding Community Service in Literature from AWP, the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. There is the 2011 Barnes & Noble Writers for Writers Award from Poets and Writers. The 2008 American Book Award for her book, All That Lies Between Us. The 2008 Chancellor's Award for Scholarship and Creative Endeavor from Binghamton University. The first annual John Fant and Pietro Di Donato Award. The New Jersey Governor's Award for Literary Outreach, and the Dare to Imagine Award from Very Special Arts. And these are just a few. One of the ways in which she has had an incredible impact on the writing community is through a role as the founder and executive director of the Poetry Center at Passaic County Community College in Paterson, and also as the editor of the Paterson Literary Review. She is a Bartle Professor and Professor Emerita of English and Creative Writing at Binghamton University, SUNY, and her papers are now housed at the Binghamton University libraries. Maria is also a visual artist and will be able to look at some of her paintings tonight, but you can also find her on her website, mariamazziotti.gillan.com. So Maria, welcome. So let me tell everyone how this hour is going to go very, very quickly. I have a far too long list of questions, and I know I won't be able to ask them all. And also want to give an opportunity to our audience to ask questions, but the most important thing is I will get Maria to also hear Maria read some of her poetry. So I will ask some questions and then we'll ask Maria to read some poems. As you think of questions, don't hold back, you can write them on the chat and then Kaylee will start gathering them. And then more or less halfway through, we will turn to the questions from the audience. So Maria, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, darling.
So your name, I don't think your name can be separated from the words poet and poetry. So you, as I said, you published more than 20 books of poetry. You've been teacher and mentor to countless writers, magazine and book editor. Your work as the founder and director of the Poetry Center. And in an exchange with Phyllis Capello the other day, trying to describe you, I said that you are the North Star of Italian American poetry.
Thank you. That's very nice. Here it is going on and off. Unfortunately, sometimes it's more off than on. But I thank you for the description. And I don't know about you, but one of the joys of my life has been teaching and mentoring writers, mentoring other writers. And it's something that I didn't have myself because, as you said, we really were studying dead writers, mostly dead white writers and dead male writers rather than any ethnic writers or that when we were in college, that's what they gave us, the dead white writers, mostly English. And so when finally we come to write ourselves and to start claiming our backgrounds and our heritage, it takes a long time to get to where you have the nerve to say, I'm going to write about being an Italian American. I'm going to write about being a wife, a mother, a daughter, a granddaughter. I'm going to write about growing up in an ethnic enclave in Paterson, New Jersey, in a house heated by a coal stove. I'm going to write about all the things that are not in any of the books that I read as I was growing up. And the books that taught me how to write poetry, basically, because reading those old white men, it gave me a sense of the music of language, music of English. I always knew there was music in Italian, but the music of English came to me when those teachers, whom I never thanked, in public school number 18, read poems out loud. And to those teachers at Eastside High School who had me read poems out loud so that I could really learn how the language felt in my mouth. it's a very sweet kind of thing, like eating a fruit, isn't it? And it kind of gets into your skin and into your body. I think the more you read, the more the language becomes a part of you. And then it took a long time for me to have the courage to say, I'm going to write about what I know, which is being Italian American, a cold water flat. I know all about that. I don't know much about being an English romantic poet, although I loved English romantic poets. And I was really thrilled to go see Keats's house and Shelley's house. And still, it had nothing to do with the life I led as I was growing up. Anyway, I don't want to get off on a tangent here.
Oh, that is perfect, actually. And you know what, I was thinking, really, who you have become in the world of poetry, the role that you have come to occupy in an international literary community. But actually wanted to ask you if you could take us back to Maria's baby steps before you published anything. Like when did you know? When did you know?
Well, when I started writing poetry when I was a little kid, basically. I was lousy, but I started trying to write because I fell in love with the sound of language, the sound of English. And when those teachers read aloud, I decided I wanted to write too. But I didn't know anything about writing or what I should write or what kind of things were the things that should interest me. But instead, I tried to copy the things I was hearing, the things I was reading, and the things our teachers were teaching us, which was okay. It was a good learning experience, a good way to learn. The other way I think that helped me was going to the library and taking out 7 books and carting them home, and then taking 7 books back and taking 7 books more out. And the library was a very safe and quiet place where I could go to read and sort of bathe in language and bathe in the sound of language. But my baby steps really were very baby steps. And it took me a very long time to be able to get out of the head of not being able to call myself a poet. I think I was 40 before I had to learn. And I had been published a lot and I had won awards, but I still didn't feel that I could call myself a poet when I thought of Keats and Shelley and Yeats. And I thought, how can you have the nerve to call yourself a poet? And then I won a New Jersey State Council on the Arts Fellowship, and my first book was published. And that was the first time I had the courage to say, I am a poet. But in my early books, I think I was hiding. And it's something I try to get my students not to do. Don't hide behind language. Don't hide. Tell the truth. But it was hard for me to do in the beginning, and I was hiding. I was writing poems mentioning Greek gods and all this other crap, and trying to prove I was smart and not just this immigrant kid from 19th Street and 7th Street in Patterson, New Jersey. I spent a lot of time trying to prove to myself that I was not just this immigrant child, poor child, and that I could actually claim to be a writer. It's very difficult though. And one of the things I found is that as you get into the literary community, it's a very much an upper middle class community. It's not a lower class community. And in a way, you have to prove you belong. If you're not really from that class, you have to keep proving it over and over again, it seems to me. Certainly in academia, you have to prove it again and again. And actually, that was very good for me. It was like being forced in a fire, because not only did you have to prove it to them, but you had to prove it to yourself. So you had to keep trying to be better and better, and to keep producing and not let them see that they were making you feel like you were this big and not worthy of attention, not worthy of being published in the same places they were, or teaching in the same institutions they taught in. So it actually helped me, because I got mad. I thought, nah, you're not stopping me. Get out of my way.
And it shows. Thank you.
I bet a lot of people in this room feel the same way. Get out of my way. You're not stopping me.
Yes.
And because I think of somebody who told me she went to graduate school with a very famous writer. And this writer wore a mink coat to class. And one day she took her outside and she said to her, "Aren't you fortunate to be in a room with us?" The woman was a lower class Italian American. And I thought, isn't that so completely what it's like? Aren't you fortunate to be in a room with us? And this woman ended up being the head of her department, the other woman's department. But she never forgot that statement. Aren't you fortunate to be in a room with us? So in a way, I think we fight that. I hate to think that academics are snobs, but they are. I'm an academic myself, but I fought against that snobbery with every ounce of energy I have. I've tried very hard in the Poetry Center and at Binghamton to try to bring writers who told the truth in their work, who didn't pretend, who didn't use language as a scrim to hide behind, who tried to illuminate what it means to be human, what it means to be alive, how to connect to people. Because if poetry isn't for other people, what is it for? It's not for those 5 white guys from Harvard. They have plenty. They don't need the poetry in the same way that we need the poetry. And we need to believe that we're worthy of doing this and that people should listen. And I'm just old enough that I now tell people when they're bullshit artists. You know, I don't stop. I like, what are you saying? And I put on the old hood accent and try to knock them on the head to make them know that I understand they're putting on the dog, and they're putting it on to try to put everybody in my class down. So I'm not going to let that happen. That's it. I'm sick of it. So in a way, by starting the Poetry Center, and I mean, we had our 40th anniversary before the pandemic. It was a huge thing. People came from all over. It was so wonderful. And then we had the pandemic and everything shut down. But it was so great to look back at 40 years of doing the Poetry Center and realize that from just an idea I had built this big thing, and that it had a lot of influence on a lot of people. And I've been able to bring poets whose work I loved and who I felt spoke for ordinary people, not just for the elite, but for ordinary people. And we're honest about their lives and what it means to be human, and what it means to grieve, and what it means to love, and what it means to be a child of parents who either love you or don't, to be a mother, a father, a sister, a brother. What does all that mean? Because isn't that what story does? It gives us the idea, the opportunity to talk about human connection. And we need to talk about it in simple words. We don't need to talk about it in esoteric $100 words. We can be as blunt and honest as we want to be. I've tried to make myself get rid of all the flowery shit. You know, no more flowery, you know, because I was trained to use flowery images. And so I had a hard time saying, okay, I'm not going to use that anymore. And I have to say, it was a graduate school professor when I was about 40. I went back to graduate school probably when I was about 37. And this graduate school professor said to me, you know, it's in this poem about your father that you find the story you have to tell. And he actually shaped my life. He actually gave me the courage. And he was a very upper middle class man. But he gave me the courage to say, okay, I can write about this. I can write about the things I really know. And ordinary life, an ordinary person's life in America in the 20th century and the 21st century. I can write about that. It's okay. And so I try to give my students the courage to say, whatever your story is, and I don't care where you come from or what your sexual identity is or what other things are going on in your life, whatever that story is, be honest about it and tell it as it is, because it's so freeing when you do that. And hiding is not freeing. Anyway.
Thank you, Maria. And it's, you know, that's why I love to teach your poetry, because there is such truth, such honesty, such combination of vulnerability and a kind of ruthlessness. And the magic for me in your poetry is that you can you can really expose the flaws of a character, where the character has done something that is at the best uncomfortable, it can be even shameful, and then simultaneously there is the moment of grace and compassion, and it's truly magic the way you do it. And I'm wondering whether you could gift us with some poems now and read a couple of poems.
Sure, I'd love to.
Thank you.
I'm going to read a poem that I read a lot, or I used to read a lot. I perhaps not as much now, but this is called Daddy, We Called You. Daddy, we called you Daddy, when we talked to each other in the street, pulling on our American faces, shaping our lives in Patterson slang. Inside our house, we spoke a Southern Italian dialect mixed with English, and we called you Papa. But outside again, you became Daddy, and we spoke of you to our friends as my father. Imagine we were speaking of that father knows best TV character in his dark business suit, carrying his briefcase into his house, retreating to his paneled den, his big living room and dining room, his frilly aproned wife who greeted him at the door with a kiss. Such space and silence in that house. We lived in one big room, living room, dining room, kitchen, bedroom, all in one, dominated by the gray oak dining table around which we sat, talking and laughing, listening to your stories, your political arguments with your friends. How Papa how you glowed in company life, happy when the other immigrants came to you for help with their taxes or legal papers. It was only outside that glowing circle that I denied you, denied your long hours as night watchman at Royal Machine Shop. One night, riding home from a date, my middle-class American boyfriend kissed me at the light. I looked up and met your eyes as you stood at the corner near Royal Machine. It was nearly midnight, January, cold and windy. You were waiting for the bus, the streetlight illuminating your face. I pretended I did not see you, let my boyfriend pull away, leaving you on the empty corner, waiting for the bus to take you home. You never mentioned it, never said that you knew how often I lied about what you did for a living, or that I was ashamed to have my boyfriend see you, find out about your second shift work, your broken English. Today, remembering that moment, still illuminated in my mind by the street lamp's gray light, I think of my own son and the distance between us, greater than miles. Papa, silk worker, janitor, night watchman, immigrant Italian. I honor the years you spent in menial work, slipping that ladder as your body failed you, while your mind so quick and sharp longed to escape. Honor the times you got out of bed after sleeping only an hour to take me to school or pick me up. The warm bakery rolls you bought for me on the way home from the night shift. The letters you wrote to the editors of local newspapers. Papa, silk worker, janitor, night watchman, immigrant Italian. Better than any father knows best father, bland as white rice. With your wine press in the cellar, with the newspapers you collect out of garbage piles to turn into money you bank for us. With your mouse traps, with your cracked and calloused hands, with your yellow teeth. Papa, dragging your dead leg through the factories of Patterson. I am outside the house now, shouting your name. It took me a very long time to be able to write that poem. And I did that to him when I was probably 17 or 18. And I never really could forgive myself for it. It was such a terrible thing to have done. And to leave him there was freezing. All for this American boyfriend. What an idiot. Anyway, I spent a lot of time trying to make up for that. But it took me a long time to be able to write the poem. I think I was 50 before I actually was able to write the poem.
You know, as a writer of memoir, I feel a special affinity to your work. You know, you are a poet, although you've run also a lot of work that's really for me memoiristic, and really at the core of your writing there is this tapping into the memory, and something that you just said, they took you many years to be able to write these poems. And well, you know, in memoir you can really write about what happened the other day. You really had to let those memories sit and just simmer. It's like my ragu that takes 8 hours.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the place of memory work, how you find the memories, how you work with your memories, and how then you translate them into poetry.
The interesting thing for me, somebody's writing an essay on my work, and he said, I want to look at your work as the entire body of it. And I have a lot of books, including the collected poems, it's fat, and a lot of other books. And he said, I want to look at your work as an extended memoir, because I think that's what it is. And it really is. It's an extended memoir in bits and pieces. Like, I recall things that happened 50, 60, 70 years ago in great detail. I don't know about you, but my memory for 70 years ago has become sharper and sharper the older I've gotten. I might not remember what I ate yesterday. I actually can't remember what I had for dinner yesterday, but I can remember very clearly sitting on 17th Street in that kitchen heated by a coal stove, and my mother bringing out farina and spaghetti and pasta vardole and all the other food, homemade bread, all the other food she made for us. And I didn't know it was peasant food. I loved it. I thought it was great. And there was a year when my father was out of work because he had an operation on his back and he couldn't move. So basically he couldn't work. Obviously he did physical work. And so they had $300 to live on. So we ate spaghetti and farina and spaghetti and farina and spaghetti and farina. And I loved spaghetti and farina. I didn't know that we were eating it because they didn't have enough money to buy anything else. It didn't occur to me. So I think memory is a wonderful thing, and that it's like excavating, though. It is like, I love your idea of archaeology, because in a way for me, I keep finding new things to remember. I don't know why they're so clear. The longer ago they are, the clearer they are. I can smell it. I can sense it. I can touch it. It seems to me that those memories become alive in me. And when I try to write about them, I hope they become alive for the people who are hearing my work. I hope they become clear to them so that they can sort of feel a little bit of what I felt.
Absolutely. And there is a sense of, in reading your large body of poetry, that as a reader, you find the echoes, the reverberations, and you encounter, for example, I mean, your father is such, I mean, so memorable in so many of the poems, and then you learn, you find another facet. So in this sense, yes, it really feels like this work of archaeological excavation. Look, she found another fragment, and there it is. And I think for the reader who stays with your work for many years, there is this sense of digging with you and finding and discovering. And if you're a writer, then it's really truly exemplary work. Will you read us another poem?
Sure. I'm going to read a poem about memory from When the Stars Were Still Visible. There's one of my paintings on the cover. In the photo, I am on the back steps of the family tenement on Fifth Avenue in Patterson, where I was born. I'm squinting into the sun, my nose wrinkling, my eyes closed against the glare. I am 2 years old, my hair a curly cap on my head. It looks blonde, though I know it couldn't have been. I wonder if I'm remembering my daughter at 2, sitting in a little rocking chair on the front porch on Oak Street in Kansas City, her hair all blonde ringlets. Strange how memory is like the fragments of a puzzle. Remember the green blackout shades in our apartment in Patterson in 1944. Remember my father dressed as a red devil for a costume party at the Società Cilentana on Butler Street. Remember the silly silver ball Silvio made from the foil inside the Camel 6 cigarettes he smoked that stained his fingers yellow. So many memories swirl like bits of color in a kaleidoscope, and so impossible to explain. Remember 17th Street when Mrs. Janelli always fainted when she got upset, and the old man who ran the candy store that was so filthy no one bought anything there. and the big garage in the Ginelli's backyard where we put on plays and something happened. I don't know what, something to do with playing doctor behind our improvised curtains. And then we weren't allowed to play there anymore. Remember Guillermo's garden with tomatoes and zucchini and corn and the vacant lot next door that seemed so huge. You'd think we had all of New Jersey to play in. I was going to see it years later, covered with asphalt and garages. And I realized that the entire block, my world until I was 11, wasn't that big, and certainly the lot small and now so ugly. Remember Patterson, when the stars were still visible in the sky. I didn't know 17th Street was in a city. Remember the sweet smell of marigolds and daisies in the vacant lots, and our house full of food and laughter, our family together on the kitchen, under the kitchen light, the company of honorary aunts and uncles, our side, our friends gathered to play stickball in the streets, hour to fill with games and books and dreaming. How lucky I was, how lucky. Patterson glowing and sparkling like a silver ball in my hand. And if you'd asked me when I was a kid, I didn't know how fucking lucky I was. Oh, can I swear on this? I sort of have a very...
We're okay.
I have a potty mouth. My daughter's horrified by me. Very, very much a potty mouth. Do you think there's time for me to read one more? I'd like to read a poem.
Yes, please.
About my father called Meatloaf and Hamburger Helper. And
Please
I just
do.
have to find it. I had written down the page. I think this sort of sums it up. Growing up, my mother cooked macaroni and gravy, meatballs and spagiola, spinach, lentil soup, roasted chicken and potatoes, zeppoli, big salads fresh from the garden, zucchini with rosemary. Meals so delicious, I can still taste them. When my children were growing up, my mother-in-law taught me how to make American food that my husband liked because he grew up on it. So I learned how to make pot roast and leg of lamb and stew and roast beef, pork chops and steak and baked potatoes. She taught me how to make meatloaf, which was cheap and could be used for one meal and sandwiches. She taught me to make meals with Hamburger Helper, which my mother called that junk. Years later, my stomach turns at the thought of Hamburger Helper, the greasy feel of it, the fake chemical taste of sauce and spices, flavor created in a lab. But when I served those meals, I was so different from anything my mother ever made. I felt I had arrived in middle-class America, that I now belonged in land that almost guaranteed you'd die for a heart attack before you could reach old age, and not the land of my father, too poor to buy all that meat. Excuse me. Pages are stuck together. Even if he had wanted it, my father, who died at 92, sitting in the sun in his garden, the aroma of tomatoes and peppers and zucchini perfuming the air around him. Isn't it strange how we're all so connected by food? At least ethnic people appear to be. All ethnic people appear to be connected by food. I'm not sure whether the Americana are so connected by food. Maybe they are.
What do you think that as immigrant communities, we leave so much behind, but we can carry recipes, and those are really portable. So and
right, there were so many things they couldn't bring. And my mother had one trunk she was able to bring, and she had her Biancaria in the trunk, but nothing much else. And they didn't have any money. It was the middle of the Depression. So what she had was the things she had learned how to make when she was in Italy. And that is all the food she could cook. And she was a superb cook. And I don't know, I go to Italy and I think, how do all these women learn how to cook like this? All these women are wonderful cooks. It's so amazing to me. Anyway, she was a wonderful cook, and that's what she brought. And she brought stories of the Bailles and the places where she grew up and the people she grew up with. And that's why I think story is so important to me. I think the old troubadours who went around and told stories to people. People wanted to hear that. That was their entertainment, because it was a way of getting a window into somebody else's life. And I think that's what our stories do. That's what memoir does. That's what poetry does. It gives a window onto other people's lives and a door we pass through, so that we can reach out to each other and can touch each other. Otherwise, so much is so cold and unfeeling in the world. And so this gives us the opportunity to touch each other in a way that's very personal and very tender and very honest. And I think that's the wonderful thing about poetry and memoir, that it gives us that opportunity. It welcomes us into somebody else's life. So therefore, I don't think faking it is a good idea.
You're absolutely right. And, it's actually, and I wanted to invite our audience, because I'm going to ask this last question, and then we're going to leave some room for questions from the audience. You do such a magnificent job of reconstructing these scenes. Your poetry is very visual. I mean, just the attention to the visual detail, the configuration of space, the light. I mean, the light in Daddy, just really, it's very cinematic. And so there has always been in your writing this great emphasis on the visual element. And of course, there is this wonderful book of photographs by Mark Ellinghaus, and with your poems on your beloved Patterson. But you also now, I mean, not now, because now it's been for a while, you've been turning to painting, and it's become this companion artistic activity. It's just some, actually, Anna, I'm going to ask if you could show some of the slides and tell us about Maria Gillan, the painter.
Well, I just like I couldn't call myself a poet for a long time, I wouldn't call myself an artist. I'm definitely a self-trained artist. And all these people, I found all these people in my imagination. They weren't actually people I've seen, but they're people that were in my subconscious mind. And the way in poetry, that's what you do. You excavate into the subconscious. And I think in art, you're doing the same thing. I find these people and they seem so familiar. Like this lady, I swear I know her, but she's a 40s lady. To me, I call her a 40s woman. And she is very much a 40s woman, the hat, the scarf, the hair, the whole thing. And she seems so pensive. I almost feel as though they talk to me. I have to say one thing is that I started painting again. I painted when I was young, but I never had any training, but I painted anyway. I always had a certain amount of nerve. And then I was in California on a reading tour with Diane DePrima, and she said, we're going into the art store to buy art supplies. I thought she was buying art supplies for herself. And she said, no, you're buying art supplies for you. And then we were driving to Santa Cruz where we had a reading, and we were staying at a motel, and we get there and she said, okay, you go in your room, I'll go in my room, I'll paint, you paint. And I went in and I had bought all these art supplies, and I started trying to paint the roses that were outside the window, and I couldn't do it. I mean, I can't even draw a straight line. So I kept crumpling up the paper. And then I thought, wait a minute, what do you tell your students in your poetry workshop? It doesn't have to be anybody else's poem. It just has to be your poem. And so I said to myself, it doesn't have to be anybody else's rose. It only has to be your rose. And once I did that, I was able to paint. And I've been painting ever since. I really, really am grateful to Diane for that and for many other things. I miss her terribly. And there was such a good thing she did for me by opening that door and giving me the courage to do it. And she said, you're not allowed to say your work is bad. Because I was, of course, trying to denigrate my own work, as I always do. And she said, you aren't allowed to say that. Who's deciding what's bad and what's good? Don't say that. So she forced me into thinking a different way. Do you want me to talk a little bit about this painting?
Yes, please. Let's just look at a few and just tell us a little bit about them.
This is another woman. I think I know her. She reminds me of my sister. My sister looked a little bit like Elizabeth Taylor. She was very Zostig and sort of looked like that. And when I tried to put this painting together, I realized that by putting that background in, it kind of made the woman jump out of the canvas. So it was great fun to do. I don't know what I'm doing. I just let myself do whatever's going to happen. And then I try not to criticize it too much. I just think, well, somebody likes it or they don't, but this is what I do. And it's a question of letting go and letting the woman speak. Doesn't she look like she's speaking? I always feel like she's talking to me. And the interesting thing is I sold a lot of paintings. I can't quite believe it, but anyway, I sold a lot of paintings and people will write to me and they'll take pictures of my painting in their house. And they'll say, I swear she's talking at me, because I did a lot of paintings of women. And I swear she's talking to me. Well, I swear she's talking to me. So I agree. I feel like she's talking to me and they feel like she's talking to them. So that's a very lovely thing to hear. Do you want me to look at a knife cord? I've lost my stylus. Oh, this is a more ethereal kind of thing. She's sort of angelic, isn't she? And
Absolutely.
and angelic, and there's a moon, and she's kind of an earth goddess and yet a heaven goddess as well. So these figures come out of my imagination. They're not real people. They're not people that I've actually met. But once they're on canvas, I feel as though I actually know them. And it's a lovely, lovely thing to find. All these new friends I didn't know we were going to have in my 8th decade. I didn't know I was going to end up having a lot of friends on my wall, and that's what this feels like. Okay, you can go to the next one. Oh, this lady's funny. She's a little stiff, isn't she? And happy with herself. But I like her anyway. I like her crazy hat. My medium is watercolor, gouache, and collage. This is mostly watercolor and gouache, and then some collage elements. I like to stick things on. Often you'll see a little cat in the corner. I put little weird things, a mouse, something like that. I have such a good time doing this. I feel guilty selling the damn things because I'm enjoying it so much. Okay, next. Okay, I like this woman very much. She looks like one of those goddesses, like an Egyptian goddess to me. She might not look that way to you, but she looks that way to me. And look at the crazy flowers and the little dog and the little cat in the corner. They're very playful, my paintings. My poetry is very serious, pretty much. Every once in a while, I'll do something funny, but mostly my poetry is pretty serious. My art is playful, and I'm letting this other part of myself out to paint. I encourage everybody to do this. It is such a wonderful, freeing thing. And don't worry whether you can paint or not, whether you can draw a straight line. As one of my friends who's an artist says, you don't need to be what good artist can draw a straight line? An engineer can draw a straight line. Don't worry about drawing a straight line. So I'm trying not to worry about being able to draw a straight line. Okay, next. Oh, this is truly weird, I know. This has all these crazy figures on it, and she really came out of my imagination, and it was a person I thought was trying to hide, and all these delicate creatures were coming out to tell her that she didn't have to hide. That's the way I feel about her. And look, her eyes are all kind of sunken, but then all these dragonflies are there, and the birds and the butterflies and the cat. I love the little cat sitting there. Don't mind me, I like my own art.
Okay, you're your best art critic.
Okay, and this is totally a collage, and this is sadder. This is an older thing I did probably 15 years ago, and it's got a sad feeling to it. To me, she looks low, and then all the semi-religious figures in the background, and the old woman sitting in the chair. There's a lot of little different elements in here. Reminds me, I did this after I came back from a reading in San Francisco, not that time when I was in Diane, a long time before that. And I went to, there's a Mexican area in San Francisco, and there's a museum. And I went to that museum, and when I came back, I did this piece because it reminded me of that and all the kind of figures that were in that museum. And this person who's sort of drooping in the chair, that's not the way I feel. I no matter what goes wrong, I'm always optimistic, but she's not too happy, that lady, and they're trying to make her feel better. Anyway, that's the end of the paintings. But if you want to see more, go on my webpage. I have a ton more.
Yes, yes, and absolutely wonderful. I adore these paintings, and they're really hypnotic. I mean, you could just sit and watch and look at them, and there is something that is so magic and surreal about all of them. But I have taken a lot of time, and I know people have some questions. So Kaylee, I would like for you now to take over and maybe and offer some of the questions from the audience so that Maria can address those. Thank you, Maria.
Sure. Thank you, dear.
First of all, Maria, thank you so much for reading your poetry and showing us your art. It's been very pleasant to look at. One of the questions that I had about your art process actually was, what is the process like going into a painting? Do you find it similar to your writing process, or does it differ?
In some ways it's similar, but I think one of the things you do when you write is you have to learn to let go. You have to I think there's an old lady who lives in your belly. She knows more than your brain, more than all the intellectual parts of you. And I try to listen to the old lady who lives in my belly when I'm painting and when I'm writing. And I try not to let the critic, and I taught at Binghamton for 20 years. And I was going to go for a year. Somehow I ended up staying there 20 years. But anyway, one of the things I realized is that the students were coming into these graduate classes with the critic embedded in their heads. So I finally said, leave the critic outside the door. I don't want to hear the critic in here. You have to let go. You have to believe that there's an instinctive part of you that knows what you need to write. And you'll realize when your pen starts moving faster and faster, you've hit the place, you've hit the cave, you've hit the thing that you have to write about. I feel the same way with the art, that when a painting is coming together, it's not a conscious thing. I'm going to put this here, or I'm going to make this figure. No, it's sort of letting it go and letting happen what's going to happen. And there'll be a critic in your head that'll say, this is no good. What are you doing? Who's going to want to look at that? I've tried to shut that one up because I have enough of that. My mother was very critical. I loved her, but she was always very critical. So I try to shut up the critic in my head, and I try to just let go and let the painting be whatever it wants to be. And I think in that way, the painting and the writing are the same. The writing requires more revision after, and the painting, I mostly do them in one shot. I do them, then I might go back and do a little bit, but mostly I just let happen what's going to happen and hope it works. Kind of like jumping into a pool. Can't be thinking, is there enough water in this pool? You jump in and you hope you can swim. And that's sort of what I do with the paintings. And so it'll be my hand moves very fast when I'm painting, but I really do let go, and I'm not trying to direct what's going on with my head. Because I think when you're in a university, you're being taught to control everything with your intellect. And I don't think creativity works that way. You control everything with this wise old woman who lives in your belly. And one of my students said, I have a wise old man with blue balls who lives in my belly. Oh, I hope that's okay to cross that out. Can you bleep that out? And I thought it was very funny. I've never forgotten it. She said that about 15 years ago. And I thought it was a very funny thing to say, because we all have a different figure in our minds of the person who has the greatest wisdom that we're leaning on when we're writing and when we're painting. And I hope you all try to paint, because it is just an exquisite pleasure.
Thank you so much. So now a couple questions from our audience.
Sure.
Matthew asks, You outwardly display your vulnerability in poems such as Daddy, We Called You. Does being vulnerable in your writing get any easier?
No, but except that now I don't start crying when I'm in front of an audience, when I read a poem. I might, my voice might tremble a little bit the first time I read my poem. But it doesn't get easier. It's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to tell the truth. We all want to look better than we actually are. My daughter said to me once, you practice selective memory, because there were things that she knew I was covering up. And she said, you're practicing selective memory in that poem. And then I wrote a poem about selective memory. And she was really right. I was practicing. There were things I couldn't bear to face. And so I covered them up. And my daughter had to point out to me that that's what I was doing. So I would have the nerve to go to that place. You never get unafraid of being vulnerable. You never become unafraid of telling the truth. But I think it's what saves you and what makes your work reach other people. I hope so. I want people to think about their own lives and to remember things about their own backgrounds and their own lives that they had maybe forgotten. I love getting a letter from somebody on top of a mountain in Montana, where I've never been, who says, I know exactly what you mean. I had the same experience. And it's such a wonderful feeling, because I think, you know what I mean? I've never been to Montana, but something in my poems connected with that person. So you don't have to be in the same, you don't even have to be in the same country, you have to discover. I'll get notes from people, because when your poems are on the internet, when you do programs like this one and they go out around the world, you'll get notes from people in Wales and in Ireland and in England and in Australia, people who've read or heard you read. And then they want to tell you about their lives. And I love that. I love that they want to tell me about their lives. Because isn't that what we're trying to unzipper other people as well as unzipper ourselves? And it should be a welcoming thing. We want, the way my mother welcomed people to her table, I want to welcome people to poetry. There's always room for one more person in my mother's house, at my mother's table. Even when she didn't have 5 cents, there was always room for one more.
Thank you.
Now, do you have another one? Because I can't really,
yes.
My eyes are bad, so I can't really read these chat. You have to tell me.
Okay, I do have another one. Marie asks, what advice would you give a writer about incorporating the theme of family into their work?
The theme of family? Well, that's all I do is incorporate the theme. There are probably times when my family would prefer me to shut up. And there are times when I've tried to hide something from my family. My mother was horrified when I first started writing, and I was a real coward when I first began to write. That I was trying to be this upper class person, which I didn't know anything about. And my mother was horrified because she said, well, why can't you write like the poems that are on the back of mass cards, or write poems like the poems we memorized in Italy before I had to leave school in 3rd grade? You know, poems about tulips and poems that rhyme and all that. It took me a long time to start hearing that in my head. And to feel, okay, it's okay to tell the truth about a relationship. It's okay to tell about the ups and downs in a relationship. It took me a long time to understand how alike I was to my mother. And, you know, she was a very strong person. So I spent some time rebelling against her. But then I realized when I looked at the mirror that we were so similar. And so, and I looked in the mirror of my poems and realized how similar we were. But it took me a long time. And I'm saying, and none of this happens in 2 seconds. But I think writing about your family is okay. If you don't want to show it to them, you don't have to. If you feel they're going to get angry or insulted, don't show it. But as long as you write it down and save it. My father was like a hoarder of things, and he would not, I don't mean that he would have a lot of stuff in his house. I mean, I would go there for dinner on a Sunday, and I was probably 35 or 36, and he would pull out a magazine I had been published in when I was 16. And he had saved it, and I had lost it. We moved a lot. You know, we went to graduate school. We came back. My husband taught at the University of Missouri. I taught at the University. So, you know, I lost a lot of things. So he would come up and he'd say, I found this magazine you were published in when you were 16. And it was so more like these gifts he would give me. Or here's an article about you from when you were in high school. Or here's another poem that was published about, here's a whole section of poems in this Italian American magazine that was published. And they said, the next Italian American poet. I was 16. So he kept all of that. And it was like he brought out little gold coins every Sunday to give me a gift. He was a wonderful father. He really was.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you for your question and for also reading the other questions. Maria, this was so wonderful, and you paid tribute to your father. You have really immortalized him, and also we love him through your words. I feel like I know your father and so much about your life, and you also teach us how to write about our loved ones and our not so loved ones.
Yes, that's the hardest part.
That's the hardest part.
So loved.
I want to show you something that I keep talking about, keeping things.
Oh my God, that was she did such a good job on those Rose Romano did such a wonderful job on those chapbooks, and she put that chapbook together, saying where's the poems should go. She was a wonderful editor. I mean, she probably still is, but I'm not in touch with her. But
you know, we have so many books, you take up the whole shelf. But this is so special. There is, you know, this slender little chapbook. There is so much strength, so much power, the strength and power that not only you embody in everything that you do, but you also so generously share with others. And I want to say thank you for all you've done and all you continue to do. You are a true gift to us. And I can wait to next week to talk with my students. And I know everyone who joined us today is very, very grateful for your generosity and for your presence. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you for being a great audience. Thank you for your wonderful questions. Thank you. Oh gosh, I forgot your name and I can't see. Kaylee, right? Kaylee. Yes. Thank you so much for your thoughtful questions and for your delicate way of interviewing. I loved it. I can't wait to see some of your writing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Oh my gosh. You guys, Maria, Eddie, Kaylee, you just brighten our world. Thank you so very much. You know, you said two things that I will always remember. You said that writing is a window into other people's lives, and it's giving permission. So I thank you so much for that. And then you said, I always had a certain amount of nerve. So I would wish that we take the nerve that you and just bring it in. Just that nerve is just amazing and gives us permission to speak our truth. So thank you so much. I want to tell you about some more amazing things that we're having at NJCU Center for the Arts on February 12th, Saturday, in person at our School of Business Lecture Hall. We have an evening with Martha Mook, who performed with David Bowie. She's going to tell some stories, play amazing music. So please come to that. And upcoming, we have some more things that you can find on njcu.edu/arts. We have the 8th annual 100-word reading marathon that Eddie is going to lead. Tuesday, February 15th, a virtual event. So come and sign up for that. And then we're going to have 2 school time performances in the daytime. Please join us. They're virtual, from a book called The Late Homecomer and The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. So many more things and many more readings this year, led by Eddie. So njcu.edu/arts, please join us. And I hope that you have an amazing evening. You've inspired us. And Eddie, any last words to?
Yes, I just want to tell everyone that the 100 word reading marathon is open to all writers, also writers who have never read in public or have never published anything. All you have to do is bring 1 to 3 100 word pieces, and we will make room for everyone to read. We've been doing this for 8 years. It's a wonderful event, and we have people joining us from everywhere. So I hope to see you there. Thank you again, Maria, Kaylee, Stephanie, and the whole wonderful team at the NJCU Center for the Arts, and our audience for joining us tonight. Thank you, and see you soon. Good night.